You're standing at the edge of a cliff, not to jump, just to scream into the dark. And the dark says nothing back. That silence right there is the start of everything Albert Camus ever wrote about. He gave it a name. He called it the absurd. Not a mood, not a phase, a collision. Your need for answers crashing into a cosmos that doesn't even know you exist. But here's what most people get wrong. They hear now the absurd and think it's a dead end, a dark room with no door. Camus said the opposite. He said that room, that silence, that void is where real freedom begins. And by the end of this, you'll see why he might have been right. Let's start with something you already do without thinking. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you check your phone, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice asks the same question it asked yesterday. Why am I doing this? What's the point? You push it down. You scroll past it, but it comes back. It always comes back. That voice isn't broken. It's doing what human brains have done for ages. Scanning for patterns, building stories, trying to weave random events into some kind of thread that makes sense. We didn't evolve this trait for fun. It kept us alive. When the sky turned dark and the wind changed, our ancestors told a story about what comes next. And that story made them move to shelter before the storm hit. But here's the catch. That same drive doesn't stop at survival. It keeps going. It asks bigger and bigger questions. Why am I here? What happens when I die? Is any of this worth the effort? And when it reaches those questions, it slams into a wall. Because the universe has no answers. Not cruel ones. Not kind ones. Just none. Camus grew up poor in Algeria. His father died in the First World War before Camus could ever know him. His mother was nearly deaf and barely spoke. He lived in a home that was thick with silence, and that silence followed him. It shaped how he saw everything. When he studied philosophy, he didn't find comfort in the big systems. He found them hollow. They felt like costumes thrown over the void to pretend it wasn't there. So he named the collision. On one side, you, hungry for meaning, aching for a story that holds. On the other side, the universe. Silent, vast, and not even aware of your question. Where those two forces meet, that's the absurd. Not sadness, not anger. Tension. A live wire with no outlet. Now most people, when they feel that tension, do one of two things. And Camus had sharp words for both. The first escape is the obvious one. You quit. You decide the pain of no answers is too much. Camus called this the final exit. He wrote about it bluntly. The first line of his most famous essay asks whether this is the only serious question in all of thinking. He wasn't being dramatic. He was being honest. If life has no built-in meaning, why keep going? He took that question and held it up to the light. And his answer was firm. To quit is to let the absurd win. It's to say the silence was right all along, and Camus refused to give it that power. The second escape is more subtle, and this is where it gets tricky. You leap into a belief system. Any system. A rigid faith, a strict code, a movement that tells you the answers are already written and you just need to follow. Camus called this a kind of mental surrender. Not because belief itself is wrong, but because using it as a painkiller to numb the tension is dishonest. You're trading your freedom for comfort. You're closing your eyes and calling it vision. Think of it this way. You're in a room with no windows. The walls are bare. Instead of sitting with that bare room, you paint a fake window on the wall. Then you tell yourself you can see the sky. The room hasn't changed. You just stopped looking at what's real. But wait, if both exits are traps, what's left? If you can't quit and you can't pretend, where do you go? This is where Camus plants his flag. He says you stay. You stay in the tension. You keep your eyes open. You refuse to look away from the bare walls. And then you do something wild. You act anyway. You choose anyway. You create anyway. Not because it matters to the stars, because it matters to you. He called this revolt, the stubborn daily refusal to pretend the void isn't there. And the word matters. Revolt, the ongoing daily stubborn act of saying no to the void without pretending it's not there. Every time you write a song no one hears, that's revolt. Every time you show up for someone you love, knowing full well none of it is permanent, that's revolt. Every time you pour coffee in the morning and choose to taste it, really taste it, instead of sleepwalking through the day, that's revolt. Here's something that surprised researchers. Researchers at the University of Missouri found something striking. People told there's no built-in meaning to life before a creative task came up with far more original ideas than those told meaning is everywhere. A second group was told the opposite, that meaning is woven into everything. The first group, the ones primed with the void, came up with far more new ideas. The absence of a script didn't crush them. It freed them. When no one hands you the rules, you start making your own. And that lines up with something Camus believed deeply. Once you accept that the canvas is blank, you stop waiting for instructions. You pick up the brush. But here's where the honest critique comes in, because Camus' idea has a real crack in it. If you build your own values from scratch, what stops someone else from building values that harm people? If there's no fixed moral code, isn't everything just opinion? This isn't a cheap shot. It's the objection that kept Camus arguing with Jean-Paul Sartre for years. Sartre leaned toward systems, toward structures of group action. Camus stayed stubborn. He said revolt must include standing with others, that the rebel who fights only for himself has missed the point. But he never quite spelled out how to draw that line. Where does your revolt end and another person's rights begin? He left that question open. Some would say that's a flaw. Others would say it's the most honest thing about his work. He didn't pretend to have answers he didn't have. Now picture this. A man in ancient Greece is condemned by the gods. His crime was defying them, tricking death, choosing life when heaven said his time was up. His sentence is to push a massive stone up a steep hill. Every time he reaches the top, the stone rolls back down, and he walks back down to start again. Forever. That's Sisyphus. And in most versions of this story, he's a tragic figure. A warning. Don't defy the powers above you or you'll suffer for eternity. But Camus flipped the whole thing. He looked at Sisyphus walking back down that hill, the moment between the peak and the bottom, and he said something no one expected. He said we must picture Sisyphus smiling. Why? Because in that walk downhill, Sisyphus owns his fate. He knows the stone will roll back. He knows there's no final victory. And he goes anyway. That awareness, that refusal to pretend his task will ever end, that's the revolt. The joy isn't in reaching the top. The joy is in the walking. Think about your own life for a second. You go to work. You come home. You sleep. You do it again. The alarm rings tomorrow and the stone is at the bottom of the hill. Does that make your day pointless? Or does it make every choice within that day a small act of defiance against the clock? There's a common trap here, and it's worth naming. People hear Camus and think he's saying goals don't matter. That drive is foolish. That planning ahead is a waste. But that's not it at all. He's saying the opposite. Set your goals. Chase them hard. But don't chain your happiness to the outcome. Because the outcome was never the point. The push was. In recent years, scholars have started drawing a strange but striking line between Camus and certain Eastern traditions. Zen thought, for example, has a long history of sitting with emptiness. Not running from it, not filling it with noise, just being inside it. A Zen teacher might say that the void is not the enemy. The void is the room where you finally hear yourself think. Camus never studied Zen directly, but the overlap is hard to ignore. Two traditions, split by oceans and centuries, arriving at a similar doorway. Stay with the silence. Let it teach you. And then there's the modern twist. Today, the silence Camus wrote about has a new rival. It's not just the cosmos that ignores your questions. It's your phone, your feed, your algorithm. These systems don't answer your deep questions either, but they do something worse. They replace those questions with shallow ones. What should I buy? Who liked my photo? What's trending? The cosmic void is still there, but now there's a digital layer on top, making it harder to even notice the first. Some thinkers call this a new kind of absurdity. The tools built to connect us end up drowning out the very thoughts that make us human. If Camus were alive today, he might look at a person scrolling late at night, eyes glazed, heart restless, and say that's a person who hasn't faced the absurd yet. They've just buried it under noise. So what does revolt look like in this age? Maybe it's putting the phone down. Not forever. Just long enough to sit with the quiet. To let the question surface, why am I here? And to let the silence answer with nothing. And to feel that nothing and not flinch. Maybe revolt is writing in a journal no one will read. Or having an honest talk with a friend when the easy path is small talk. Or waking up early, not because a guru told you to, but because the morning is yours and you chose to meet it. These aren't grand acts, they're quiet ones. But Camus believed the small, repeated choice to engage with life is the most powerful thing a person can do. If this shifted how you see the void, even a little, there's more to explore on this channel. If something here landed, leave a word below. I read them. The boulder is at the bottom of the hill. The alarm is ringing. And somewhere in that space between the bed and the door, you get to choose. Not because anyone is watching, because the push is yours.